that we have all across the country. Hopefully this information will also be helpful regardless of where you are at. We try to keep it as broad as possible. But again, if there's any specific questions pertaining to area or state, we do have a Q&A session at the end. We may be able to help answer those. If not, we will definitely be able to help direct you to someone who can help you. Awesome, awesome. And if you don't mind throwing in the chat, where are y'all meeting us from right now? I am currently in sunny San Diego, California, but I know that we have a lot of folks from a lot of different areas. So it's always exciting to see who we're able to connect with and what our community is currently looking like. Oh, nice. How wonderful. Texas, let me see, Florida, California, we're neighbors. Washington, New York, Connecticut. Oh, wow. Oh, my heart is so full right now. I'm so happy. That's awesome. And just to also like emphasize, this information is so needed in so many different areas of the country too. So it's so nice to see how many folks are able to come together today. And thank you again for being able to make the time to come learn more, either if you're a student or work with students, to educate yourself in better ways to advise your students. It's always wonderful to be able to create a larger community of folks. Chicago. I hope it's not too cold over there. We recently went to a conference in Chicago. It's definitely very chilly and windy. But okay, I will begin just for time constraints. Hi, everybody. My name is Rocio Muñante Navarro. I am the Networking and Training Manager here at Pre-Health Dreamers. Today, we're going to be presenting on 2 documents that we have worked very hard on. We have collaborated with committee members to be able to bring forth these documents. One of them is going to be frequently asked questions that we get for folks who are pursuing medical school. And undocumented, how does the MCAT look like? There's a broad range of questions such as, am I able to go into medical school without a SSN? And our documents will go a lot more in depth. These are just going to be some of the questions that we see that are asked more frequently of us. And also the second one, our newly published document is going to be one pertaining to postbac programs, what they are, any recommendations that we've seen from personal experience of students and how they were able to succeed in them, how financial aid may look like, and a lot of really great information. Let's see. And we are Pre-Health Dreamers. We are a nonprofit that was established in 2012 by really our founders were thinking ahead of how to become doctors when there was no right pathway. There were some unicorns out there in the wild that were able to make it in higher education, but there was not really a well-connected source of information. So it was great to see how well our community has grown and expanded, especially with education and its more accessibility now. We work directly with students and also institutions, and to bring holistic support to our undocumented students population, whether that be folks with DACA, without DACA, TPS holders, asylum seekers. We cover a broad range of, we service a broad range of individuals, and we are always currently learning from our community. So it's great to see how many of y'all are joining us today. And an overview. So we're going to be going over 3 questions from each of our documents. These are in a sense, the most asked questions that we do get. We do student advising, one-on-one advising, whether that be someone who is interested in medicine, seeing their options about being able to pursue a medical degree. How does a nursing degree work? Am I able to work in certain states? Those are very common questions we get asked, and also folks who are interested in post-bac programs, whether that be they're in community college, they're in high school, they're still thinking about a future career and trying to figure out what is the best road to get there, and any tips or tricks that we have previous students who have worked for them. We try to share that knowledge with them as well. And again, we will have a Q&A session at the very end. So please don't forget those questions, write them down. We will stop recording for that as well. And one of the biggest questions that we do get asked at Pre-Health Dreamers is, can I get into medical school without DACA? There's a short answer and there's a long answer. For the sake of time, yes, it is possible. Right now, they are current medical students throughout the country in all types of schools, affiliations, private, public, who are in medical school, and they don't possess a social security number or the protections that comes with DACA. So yes, there are people doing it. Is it difficult? Does it have more steps? Is it a little bit more complicated? Definitely. And we'll and that is where the long question goes into play. But again, the number one thing we advise students is start early. If you think you want to go into medical school, if you think you are interested in pursuing a health career, the earlier you are getting information, connecting, building your network, advocating for yourself, the better your outcome is going to be in the long run. And there is also a list of schools that admit DACA recipients. It's going to be on the AAMC website. And again, in these documents that we have been able to produce, there are links to them. So you don't have to write everything down. All this information is going to be on the documents. And at the very end, we have reference page where we are taking this information from as well. So just for your knowledge, it's going to be in the documents where we will be sharing that with you all as well. And some of the advice that we do give our students is start with schools that are reaching out to schools early on that are currently accepting DACA recipients. They may be a little bit more familiar with the undocumented student process, how that looks, admissions looks like, enrollment, classify them, what type of tuition, what type of, they may have additional aid for them. Let me see. And yes.
And then also, I wanted to just step in, Rocio, really quick. Hi, everybody. My name is Yadi. I'm the Executive Director of Pre-Health Dreamers. I'll be filling in and stepping in a little bit just to also provide some support. And so, again, like Rocio was saying, the short answer to undocumented students without DACA attending medical school, yes, it is possible. And just reiterating, Rocio, like it's really important for you to start early researching. One of the best ways to start is going through that MSAR or seeing what schools are available when to DACA recipients. And even that list now, I think it's been updated to even say whether or not they even accept students without DACA. However, we always just encourage you to still contact the school if you really want to attend that campus or that program, and double check, because things are constantly changing. And so you just want to always double check, ask those questions and things like that. As we're going to discuss this, I believe, later on, but I think one of the most difficult things that administrators kind of have a struggle with in accepting students without DACA is whether or not they're going to be able to finish the program and then do residency. So those questions are going to come up. So there's going to be a lot of conversations that you may have to have, advocate for yourself, advocate for them to change admission policies. Again, there are already schools that are doing it, but it is time consuming, and there will still be some schools that will say no to admitting students without DACA. So just be aware, it's still taking a lot of conversation, a lot of advocacy. But yes, there are folks that are already doing it and schools that are already doing it. So we will dive into it a little bit more later on in the specifics of each of those points. So just hang tight.
Yes. Thank you for that, Yadi. And again, even if there is nothing explicitly stating that some schools may allow undocumented students to enroll into their school and complete it, there might be a yes, and people haven't been exploring that option yet, or they haven't had a student who has asked that question. So it's always great to be curious and to try to see if you can connect with someone at a school to learn more about the program and see if there's a way for them to for enrollment to occur. So one of the other our second most asked questions comes with money. And of course, money's really such an important factor, especially in the undocumented community. And some folks not having access to employment authorization, which is why it's such a relevant topic. But there are people currently doing it. There are students who have successfully completed medical school. And regardless of financial aid, our community is so resilient, we're going to find a way to do it, whether that be taking things in our own hands, doing fundraisers or comidas, or finding ways to collect that kind of funding for tuition. It's going to happen. But some schools are a little bit more at liberty to provide financial aid than others. So looking at the cost of medical school. So at the moment, medical school going in is going to be around $2,500, $1,000 at public institutions. That cost includes with tuition, health insurance, housing, food. So just a general amount of money to be able to that most students spend while completing their medical education. And at a private institution, it is going to be a little bit more costly. And again, this is a median cost, but it's also very important to take these costs into consideration when deciding when and how to apply to medical school, and how to see if there's programs for to decrease that cost, such as like the financial assistance program that the AAMC does provide to folks with low income, and that does not have a citizenship requirement. That's really important to know. And that FAP program is going to help you take your MCAT, and also it's going to provide tuition waiver or application waivers for a certain number of schools when you are applying to medical school. So that's always important to know. And also something that's super important to keep in mind is could apply to a broad range of schools, whether that be public or private institutions. Some institutions may be able to have another source of funding that a public institution may not have or a private institution doesn't have. So it's always important to have a wide reach when you are applying to these schools. And Yadi can talk a little bit more about what the financial aid looks like while you're at a school.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be one of the biggest barriers as students are matriculating, regardless of your status, right? Even if you are a resident citizen, have DACA, don't have DACA, I think the tuition component is one of the biggest barriers for undocumented students who have DACA or don't have DACA or even have TPS. This is really at the front and center of the obstacles that you may be facing. And so as Rocio was mentioning, we want you guys to apply at all of the schools that you guys want to, regardless if they're private or public. With public institutions, they do tend to have less money to provide financial support, or they may have more restrictions on what they can do with that funding. However, we have seen staff members, deans, faculty really coming together and advocating for students to be able to provide really hefty financial aid support for students. It really just takes on the student's end, unfortunately, to find those folks on that school, look for those deans, start talking to them early to make sure that you have a really good community there, a good support system that's going to advocate for you. We've seen public institutions provide good amount of scholarships to the students to pay for their tuition. It just takes that kind of community building and that support from them. We've also seen private institutions with a lot of money be more hesitant or not give financial aid to students. And we've seen other private institutions give a good amount. And so it's really going to be depending on that institution, those administrators, those deans, those allies. So it's really beneficial that you connect with them and find the folks. You probably sometimes just need one person really advocating at that school to help find funding for you. So we don't want you to close the doors to yourself right away just because the school's more expensive. Like make those connections early on, and we can always help you do that. We've helped students, find out who are those go-to persons at those schools, because that's really going to be important. Also advocacy. Advocacy is a big lifeline, fortunately and unfortunately for students. Advocating, what we're talking about when we say advocacy, it's really asking for more support, changing of processes, changing of procedures. So just for example, like if there are scholarships on that campus and they require a US citizen, ask why. Sometimes that's just a grandfather down requirement that people just put. So you want to ask, like, why is it, why do you need a US citizenship requirement for me to apply to that scholarship or to that funding that's available, to that institutional aid? We have seen students change those processes or those requirements at their campus. Again, it takes time. And so start early with that. If you are an educator on here, it's really important that we just don't send scholarship links to students, because they're going to see that US citizenship. If they're on there, they're going to get really discouraged and may not keep looking. So it's really important to really be hands-on with the student and say, hey, these are the scholarships that are for you. We don't want you to waste time, because it's already really time consuming and a big pressure to be applying for medical school, let alone go through hundreds of links to find that one scholarship that's probably even like just $10,000 for a $250,000 tuition. That's a lot on a student. So if you're an educator on here, really encourage you to like really narrow your list down for undocumented students and help advocate so that we remove US citizen restrictions. And I'll do this really quick. This is something that we've been looking into a lot: endowments. A lot of schools do have endowments. What is an endowment? Endowment is a fund that a lot of schools have. Some are small endowments, some are larger endowments, depending on the size of the school, how long the school has been in existence. Is it an Ivy League? Do they have a lot of funders? Some have really small pockets of funding. But where we come from when it comes to endowments is a lot of times endowments are kind of see it as a savings account. That's the best way I can explain it. Like a savings account or a side pocket of money that institutions have to, one, fundraise, increase their funding to be able to provide money to different programs activity. A lot of time those endowments and that funding for the endowments go to research. Sometimes it goes to financial aid to students. Sometimes it goes to both. There is a board a lot of times that oversees this endowments, but it's really important, especially if you're an educator and administrator. How does the endowment at your campus that you want to go to work? Who oversees that endowment? Is there any way to do training and advocacy so down the line they can open up use that endowment to get scholarships for students? Again, all of this takes time, so it's really important to start early, the advocacy, the education, and finding that support team that's going to help you advocate if you're the student, or build that task force at your campus that's going to be able to help advocate for all of this funding to be available to students.
And again, just like Yadi talked on, there are different types of financial aid available. Financial aid can include in-state tuition options. It's always going to be a little bit less expensive if going into it in-state school, if there's that possibility. There's going to be programs such as fee assistance programs. I see in the chat that we were discussing that, which is awesome. It's going to give some additional support during the application process. And additionally, sometimes institutional aid does have some need-based scholarships, so that may be available. And some merit-based scholarships, emergency funding, grants, fellowship scholarships. And this is a call to the administrations, institutions, folks are working with students at these institutions to see why is there a citizenship requirement on certain scholarships if it's not necessary? Is a funding coming from a federal base? If it is there a way to remove that US citizenship requirement? It's always good to be curious, continue to ask questions, and see if we can open these types of additional support for our undocumented student community, because a lot of the times financial need is one of the biggest barriers for students in general. It could be students with citizenship. It's always like, how am I going to pay $500,000? How am I going to pay $250,000? And to some folks, that's not plausible, or it's way beyond even such a large number to even think about. And I know once going into a couple $1,000s, like in my head, I can't even envision like that amount of money. So it's super daunting, especially folks who come from working class or parents who aren't professional in the professional settings or making large sums of money. It's going like myself, it's very difficult to envision that amount of money. Employment, we don't recommend students working while going to these health professional programs. We know how difficult and time consuming they are, but the reality is some students still do it. And just to keep that in mind, some students may do tutoring on the side. And again, this is a last option, but at the end of the day, people still need to eat, people still need to pay the rent. And if the schools aren't being able to provide this additional funding, students are going to find a way. We're going to, like, our community is so intuitive in that sense. We're going to find a way to get it done. And unfortunately, sometimes that does come with additional burdens, such as some students taking on employment while they are in school. And that's the reality of it. And loans would be one of the last options we want to provide for students. Whether they be institutional loans or private loans, that interest percentage is so it multiplies the principal amount of the loan so many times forward. So this is something that we don't really want our students to take out loans. So again, that comes with the advocacy and leveraging. If you do get accepted into medical school, are there financial aid packages? And even talking to someone in administration, it could possibly increase the amount of support that school gives you if they see that you have a certain number from another school. So it's always important to like advocate for yourself. And I know that's super daunting, especially when you may have gotten a lot of no's in the past, but it helps you out exponentially if you are able to voice that concern of potentially not being able to go to medical school if it comes down to the financial aspect of it. And we have seen students successfully do that and have their whole education funded, which is far and few in between, but it's not impossible. And again, crowdfunding would be an additional type of financial aid as well. We see some folks doing GoFundMe. They do a car wash, bake sale, and even in churches, community events. We see a lot of support coming from folks who got donations from their church because they weren't able to finish paying off tuitions, which is a beautiful thing to see. But again, that's very uncommon, very far few in between that some folks have the ability to do so.
And
And
quick, Rocio, if I can add, like for a lot of students, I think sometimes like what we try to encourage or try to like spotlight is when you're educating or reaching out to deans or to administrations at your program, like really kind of take ownership of who you are and why you belong at that medical school or at that program that you're trying to apply to. So we want to encourage you to kind of look in within yourself and just know like I am worth it. Like
mhm,
I am worth it. I am valid. I am going to this medical school. This is what I'm going to bring in. This is why they should accept me. This is why they should support me.
mhm,
Process that. Like, what are you bringing to the table, right? Do you have, you know, skill that you can bring in, a background that you can bring in? You know, I think that's always really important. And I think that sometimes that keeps folks from moving forward. Like, how am I going to fight for all this funding? When at the end of the day, like, if you're getting accepted, it's because you belong there and you have something to bring to the table. It's up to you now, or like it's for you to process, like, what am I bringing to the table?
mhm,
Why should they provide this financial aid to me? Right? Do I have an experience that nobody else in that classroom or in that lecture room is going to have?
mhm,
Because you guys are going to be some of the first immigrants or the first DACA recipient or the first undocumented student without DACA stepping into that classroom. What are you bringing in and why should they accept you? And so I really want you guys to process that and take ownership because in all of these conversations, I want you guys to have that kind of like, you know, feel like you guys are worth it. And that's what it's going to take. With crowdfunding, we, you know, some folks are really, you know, okay with doing that. Other folks do not feel comfortable. That's something that's really up to you. For some folks, it's work. For others, it hasn't. I think when it comes to crowdfunding, it really depends on who you have as a community around you. Like, do you have folks that are going to help you fundraise? Do you have folks that are going to help support? Have you made those connections in the last couple of years? Do people know your story? Do people know you? Others haven't been successful or they're really shy about it. So crowdfunding, we have some folks that are okay with it, some folks that are not. Again, that's going to be really up to you. We just want to bring it up because it's an example of what some folks have done.
definitely. And again, you will, if you are being admitted to these schools and when you are admitted to these schools, because we're going to speak it into existence, um, it's not because you're just a nice person, they like you. It's not because of that. It means that you have the qualifications that these institutions are looking for. You have the qualifications, you have the traits that they see you being a potentially great doctor or physician provider. And it's it's you need to take full again, like Gabby said, ownership of that, because you are the commodity, you are what they want, you are who they are striving to get through those doors. So if I know it's super daunting saying, oh, like I got in, like maybe it's an accident, maybe I just snuck by, but at the end of the day, you did not sneak by. There's a million people looking at your application. There's even more talking about who's gonna be interviewed, who's not. If you got in for a reason. And
Yeah.
it's wonderful. And tell us, we want to celebrate with you. We love knowing where our students are at. Even if we can help anywhere along this process, you don't have to connect with us just when you're in application season, just when you're in taking your MCAT or right before. You can connect with us as a freshman, as someone who's in high school who wants to potentially learn more about health careers. We're here the whole step of the way. So please, please, please connect with us. Moving on to something not so happy. Loans, co-signers, and credit scores.
Yeah,
So
and I can take this one, Rocio.
of course,
Um, so with loans, cosigners, and credit scores, as Rocio said, well, this topic is just such a heavy topic. And so there are folks that have been taking out loans. A lot of times educators or administrators, deans, um, you know, they send students off, like, go look for a loan. at the end of the day, if you're an educator on here, if you're an administrator, this is one of the most difficult things that we can have a student do who is undocumented. Because the reality is that there are loans out there, right? There are loans for folks that have DACA, that don't have DACA. However, most of them do need a cosigner. And most of them do need a cosigner that has a higher income or has a great credit score. Some of these have really high interest rates. And so really, I would always encourage the student and the families to have these conversations on whether or not we want to take out a loan for our school. Do we have that cosigner? But what I also want to make educators and administrators aware of is us asking the student to go get a loan. Sometimes it's advising that really puts the student in a very difficult situation, and I would even say sometimes harmful. We've known students who have been looking for cosigners. They're not even a family member. And now they're indebted to 2 or 3 people, even more sometimes, that have cosigned for this. And so that one takes a toll on the student. Two, that could potentially put the student in a really tough and potentially dangerous situation. So as a school, as advisors, we really want to move away from that and see how we can help as a community within the school. How much can we provide? Let the families have those conversations. Undocumented families have been taking out loans for cars, for homes, for things like that. For school, it's a little bit different. And those, like we said, those interest rate, those cosigners are really difficult obstacles. And so we really encourage the families to have those conversations. And we really want the educators and the administrators to kind of look within their institution to see how they can support. So again, there are programs out there. There are loan programs that have provided loans to students with DACA, such as Discover, Empower, still there's so many different ones. Again, most of them do need that US citizen cosigner or permanent resident cosigner, and those interest rates are really high. We also want to make folks really aware, what does it mean to go look for a cosigner? Cosigners, it's really going to depend on the loan. And these are questions that you want to ask, like how is this going to affect the cosigner's credit score? Sometimes it affects them. Sometimes it appears right away on their credit score that they have this huge loan on their, credit now. Sometimes it doesn't come out until, let's say, the borrower, the student, forgot to make that monthly payment, and now it's on the cosigner's credit score. So it can affect the credits, the cosigner. Also, it can have some positive impact sometimes, that loan on individuals, because it keeps your credit running, but other times it doesn't. So you want to have those clear conversations. If you're the student looking for a cosigner, it's really important to have conversations with that cosigner. Put maybe a contract together, have an open discussion. Sometimes what works is, hey, can you cosign? Maybe I'll give you 2 months worth of payment in case I miss a payment. You have that safety net there to make that payment for us. Give them 1 or 2 months worth before they even sign or when they're signing. Also give them access to that account so that they keep track and know how much is going there. Another thing also I want to bring up with credit cards or with even loans, you can always also, if you end up taking out a loan and you do end up having a cosigner, down the line, you can always refinance that loan. Find a new loan that's going to be able to take on that account with a lower interest rate. Maybe you can remove that cosigner down the line when you're more established as a health professional. So just because you marry a loan company doesn't mean you always have to stay with them. However, we encourage you to stay up to date with different changes, like, who's opening new account, like who's now allowing DACA or undocumented folks without a social take out loans from those companies. It takes some time and takes effort to continue to do that research. We try to do it as much as possible, as we can, as we can here at Pre-Health Dreamers. Can you go to the next slide? And so I want to bring to your guys' attention two loans right now that are available that we have found, and they're actually nonprofits. They're not just loan companies, they're actually nonprofits that have a mission to work with sometimes underrepresented, low income, historically underfunded communities. Um, and so two of the ones that we have found and that we've partnered with, as far as like sharing their information, is self-help and social finance. Know that self-help is a nonprofit that provides loans to medical students who have DACA. At this time, that is their capacity because they are a nonprofit. They do have to fundraise to be able to provide these loans. So they're also limited on who they can give it to. So right now they've started with medical school students who have DACA. Um, they are a loan, they do provide loans. So if you're interested in that and want more info, let us know. You can also find them on our social media. We have a post on them. But self-help is one of them. The other one is social finance. So social finance is a little bit more wide in their options on who they lend money to. They lend money to DACA and TPS recipients, and you don't just have to go to medical school. They also cover a wide range of graduate and professional programs. They don't cover undergraduate, but they do cover graduate and professional programs such as medicine, dentistry, master's in nursing, and so on. But for them, you do have to have DACA or TPS. The great thing about these two loan programs is that they mimic the federal student loans, APR or interest rate. So whatever it is, I think this last year was 8 or 9% compared to some of the other loan programs that are probably 18% or a little bit higher, depending on this credit score of the borrowers. And so that's what we really do appreciate about self-help and social finance, that they do that. Now, self-help, one thing that they do is they work with the school in order to provide the loans to their students. So they do require that the medical school provides some funding to the student, and kind of just process this as, if the school is not going to believe in the student and funding them, why should a company? So kind of process it that way if you're an educator. So we really encourage schools to work with self-help. If you have DACA recipients entering your medical school, can you provide some of the funding so that self-help can come in? So if the student does get a self-help loan, you will get a call, the school will get a call from self-help and say, how much are you funding? Because we require a percentage of funding. You can ask self-help how much that is. I think it's like 15% of the funding, but don't quote me on that. You can ask them because that can also change. But they do require that the school also provide funding to the student and are just not putting the whole amount on a loan. Social finance is a little bit different. They don't require that. And then also with social finance, they don't require neither of these two require a U.S. citizen cosigner. You can be a cosigner with an I-10. That's the other great thing about these two. So please make note of them. We have more information about them on our website, or just email us if you need more help. But schools, I really encourage you to open the doors to these companies because they do reach out to you guys to be able to learn how you're funding your students, so maybe they can provide funding for them as well. We are continuously doing advocacy and we're continually doing research to see if we can find more of these for you guys. But right now, these are the two best ones that we have found. There may be more, but this is a great place to get started.
And moving on to one of our other most asked questions is regarding medical licensure once medical school is completed. So in short, DACA recipients, we have not, students who have completed medical school and enrolled into residency programs who have DACA, they have not seen any issues, or we personally have not heard of any of them having any issues. But again, the state also has to have certain guidelines when providing these licenships, and we're going to share a list of states that currently provide professional licenships to DACA recipients and folks without I-10 numbers. When it comes to individuals without DACA, then there is a little bit of a longer conversation to be had, and this itself can take a whole hour. So I'm gonna kind of breeze by it. If you have any more questions, again, please reach out to us. But in a sense, students complete step 1 and step 2 when they are in medical school. So therefore, we have not seen an individual who has any problems when they don't have DACA completing their board licensing step 1 and 2. What we kind of see is right now we're still exploring options on step 3. Step 3 would be the final board test. And that would be the one that would provide the license for someone to practice as a physician in the United States. Step 3 is going to take place during residency, and residency does come with an employment authorization or SSN requirement. And we are currently working to explore options, see what other folks are doing. If you are in administration and administration work in these institutions, we'd love to have this conversation with you. We've been advocating with the UC system. We've been speaking to a lot of Caribbean schools to see how they're doing as well. And we're still trying to find a way, but that does not mean that we want to discourage students who don't have DACA to pursue medical school, because again, medical education, completing it is possible, and laws, regulations, and even as you're going to see the list of states who do provide licensure without ITIN is always changing. Laws can change from one day to another. It just means having to delay the residency component until our laws are catching up to where we currently see our students at, until we are and also to take in mind, not every single individual who's completing medical school goes into residency. The match process is very complicated, very, very limited spaces are available to students. And even now, we kind of see how that's impacting students who aren't undocumented. These spaces, the limited amount of spaces means that some individuals are applying a couple times before being able to get accepted into a residency program. And some folks decide during medical school, this is not what I want to practice clinical medicine. Clinical medicine isn't no longer an option for them. They go into teaching, they go into pharmaceutical work, they go into research, biotech companies, startups, and there's no questioning them why they aren't going into residency once they make those decisions. And we want to also ask administration to extend that sentiment and to our undocumented individuals. If this is a reason why hesitancy for admittance to medical school is happening at your institution, we would like for you to implore, is this same sentiment being extended to folks without or who are currently US citizenships? Is there a process of following up with them once they're done with medical school? If there's no issue with that, why is this sentiment not being extended to our undocumented students as well? Not everybody's going to want to practice clinical medicine, and that's just the reality of medical education as a whole. But again, I could talk about this for a whole hour, so I'm going to move on. And right now, currently postgraduate training. So the residency component to medical education, you would need an SSN and a valid employment authorization. And also for the very last board exam, you would need to complete that during a residency program. But again, we're always trying to advocate for the inclusion of undocumented students in the residency and matching up process. Administration, this is an ask for you all. Connect with us. Let's have this conversation. Let's see what we can do. We would love to be able to start or continue to have these and implore any options you may know that we are not aware of. In licensing. So this is a documentation that Pre-Health Dreamers has created. This is also posted on our website. There'll be links to our websites and our documents at the end of the slides as well. But for licensings for DOC recipients, that list is always expanding, always growing. So again, take in consideration, laws are always changing, expanding, just as immigration laws are always expanding and changing. Our most recent licensing without TIN laws was in Maryland. And just because there is a state that may not be on here doesn't mean that there is policy specifically stating that undocumented individuals cannot get a license in that specific states. We've had students that are from states that are not on here receive licensing from as a tech or that or any part of the healthcare field that we're able to get a license, even though there is no specific law stating that yes, they can receive it, or no, they can't receive it, unless the state specifically says that undocumented individuals cannot receive licensing, then it's up in the air and depends on each individual case. So again, we ask that you continue to explore and do more research into this and talk to an individual from your specific state who may have more information on that. And we can help connect you with those individuals too. And again, we are really short on time, so I will try to speed this as well. What is a postbac? Two of the main reasons why students will complete a postbac is because they are career changers. Career changers are going to be individuals who want to pursue a health career and they completed an undergraduate degree that did not complete all the requirements for that program. So therefore, an example would be an English major who decided in their junior year they wanted to explore medicine. Once they graduate with their degree in undergraduate studies, they may complete a postbac, which means that they will have to take all their basic science classes to be applying to their health professional program. Once they're done with that, or an individual who is an academic enhancer would be an individual who may not have had the strongest GPA trend or GPA in their undergraduate classes, but they want to take additional classes to strengthen their application and become a more competitive applicant or boost their own confidence in their academic abilities. And for the purpose of simplicity, we divided the postbacs into two different categories: the informal postbac, or commonly known as the DIY postbac, and also the formal postbac programs. So for the informal postbac programs would mean that there is no structure given by an institution for these. These would be such as like taking additional classes at a community college level to be able to um, have those grades included into your overall GPA, or career changers, which is a little bit less known of, but there are individuals who have completed all the prereq classes at community college level, and therefore once they were done with their undergraduate degree and did a DIY at a community college or an undergrad institution, such as an extension program, they were able to apply to medical school. And formal postbacs are more structured. They come with more of a application process. There's whole postbac CAS is a whole system of that houses a lot of these applications for a variety of schools. Formal postbacs are either categorized as career changers or, again, record enhancers. The majority of these are going to either be certificate granting, such as that the institution is certifying that you completed these classes, or they may not give a certification, which means that you are not receiving an additional degree for completing these programs, but the main reason why folks complete them is so those classes would be added to their transcript, so therefore application, so then they can apply or to strengthen their GPA. And also there are master's programs that are available, and also some, yeah, master programs are available. These are special master's programs. And one of the one of the questions also that we get asked frequently is, should I complete a postbac or a master's? And basically that just is, why are you completing a postbac? That's the main question asked. Are you completing a postbac because you want to strengthen your GPA? Is it because you want to have better confidence in your abilities to complete higher education coursework? What are the benefits of each specific program that you're interested in going? So it's really important to do research on the programs that you are interested in. Some of the master's program and the formal postbacs, uh, they have overlapping things that they both provide, such as some of them may come with MCAT preparation, committee letters, research opportunities built into their coursework or their class structure. So again, it's super important to do your research early on. And another really cool factor, something that a lot of students are interested in, is that some postbac programs do have possible linkages to their medical school or health profession program, which means that depends if the majority of them are if you are a really great student while you're completing this certain program and get above a certain grade average or complete these certain requirements, they'll either guarantee you a interview, or they'll guarantee your interview or guarantee that they will look at your application, either or. Again, it's always great networking, and even if you are in these programs, to get connected to that, if to the medical school or health profession program, if they have one on their campus or are affiliated with one. And one of the biggest asks and takeaway from this document is going to be, take some time to reflect on why you are taking why you were thinking of doing a postbac. Is it because you want to get higher grades? What's different from undergrad to your classes now? Did something change in your schedule? Are you able to spend more time and dedicate more of yourself to these classes? Are you going to do good in these classes? It's not cheap. Having from personal experience, postbac programs do not have a lot of financial aid for in general, and not just for undocumented students. Most of the time, since these programs don't provide additional degree or are considered bachelor's degree, funding in a sense kind of comes to a halt. And my classmates have had to take out loans, even as U.S. citizens. I've had to take out loan while completing my master's program. It's very expensive, upwards of 35K or more on the average. Just take that in mind, and that's for a master's or post-bac. Those are the numbers we're seeing. So it's not cheap. So it's super important to take time, reflect what's different, what's going to be different. Am I doing this for the right reasons, such as, can I find these resources somewhere else and for free? Or is it because I want the comfort of having structure in my life? Me, for myself, I'm really, really big on needing structure to be successful. So this is why I decided to go with a formal program as opposed to trying to do a DIY. Because doing a DIY postbac, we have seen that it is a lot more difficult for students to keep track of what classes they're able to transfer over on their transcript, what classes they're able to complete that will count for their science GPA and whatnot.
And really quick, so you guys can visit the postbac and medical school QRs codes. The postbac also goes into, like, right now, if you're still in undergrad, if you're still in undergrad, please make sure to read the section about academic renewal. So a lot of students do not know about academic renewal or processes that can help them raise their GPA before they graduate from their undergrad. If you are in your undergrad and there's still time to fix that GPA in one way or another, please talk to an advisor because it's going to save you a lot of time and money. We encourage you to like try to do that before pursuing a postbac. So really quick, academic renewal, what that is if something happened during your undergrad, like an emergency, whether it's health or personal, I've had students go through really, really hard times. And they never told anybody, right? And me, I used to be an admissions counselor, so I used to review transcripts. I can tell when something happened. The student was having A's and B's, and all of a sudden there was a semester with D's. And so we know, like, hey, what happened? So when I would ask the students, they would really tell me their story and like, hey, this is happening, or this happened during that time frame. Sometimes I was able to tell them, go back to your school, see if you can still do academic renewal if you're still in an undergrad, or even if you've graduated, see if you can go back and petition for those grades to be removed, especially if you repeated them, or if you can, if you're still an undergrad and you have time to take those classes over. Academic renewal, what that is they'll completely erase bad grades from your transcript. Every school has their own process, their rules. You have to have proof. So, whether it's a medical emergency or something, just talk to somebody if something is going on. Talk to an advisor and see if there's a process. Again, that is one of the possibilities. Sometimes it's really hard to get academic renewal, but if you have a really good, if you have a proof and really do have something that happened during that time, and that specific semester or quarter is dropping your GPA, please know that there may be a process that can help you get your GPA up by removing grades while you're still in undergrad. So pay very close attention to that section. We want to avoid you guys having to do postbacs as much as possible if you can, if you're still at that time.
Yes. Again, postback is going to be a very last uh, option that we encourage students. It's an option, of course, but not one to be taken lightly or to be used as a backup, in the sense of, if you're already in undergraduate or currently doing your classes, do your best to not have a postback. And I'm gonna open it up for a couple minutes. I know we're right about passing our time, but is there any questions that we may be able to answer? I will also